you ever wondered about Front Sight's 2-day defensive handgun course? Or are you going to attend and just want to know what to expect? Following is just a rundown of my experience on the 2-day defensive handgun course at Front Sight. As some of you may or may not know, I went down to Front Sight to do the 2-day defensive handgun course. Went down there with the late Boy Scout and his buddy Steve. Great company to have down there, cool guys. And thanks to Scout, because he actually had a coupon that I was able to use, and I got a lot of discount on the course. So thank you much to him, I appreciate it. On arrival to Front Sight, we got there and there's a whole bunch of people. In fact, I think there were over 400 people that attended on the 2 days that I went. There was various courses going on there, the 2-day, 4-day CCW, which is kind of a combination of the two, and a shotgun course that I know of. But as you come in, they seem to be pretty well organized with directing people where to park and directing people where to go so that you can do a gear check, make sure everything's okay, getting you assigned to the range master that you need to. The class sizes were about, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 people maybe, somewhere around there. Anyways, for the most part it was really well organized, but the first half of the day, of the first day, it was pretty basic. Going over the gun, going over just the very basic parts and basic operations of a handgun. For me, who has been around handguns for a while, I'm not calling myself an expert, but honestly I found that part of it a little bit boring. I had to keep myself engaged a little bit. However, given what the course is designed to do, I thought it was very appropriate. In addition to that first part of the day, we went over how to handle the gun. Specifically how to press check, unload, load, sight picture, alignment, and grip. So a lot of the basic stuff. That I was really interested in because I really wanted to empty my cup, so to speak, so that I could see if I could learn something new in regard to that. I mean, I've been shooting for a long time with pistol guys, but I wanted to go in and say, look, let me have an open mind here so I can learn. We finally got on to actual shooting, which I was kind of waiting for, and there was little live fire in the first half of the first day, but what they focused on is what they called controlled pairs, or what you might hear in other circles as a double tap. And they're going to have you shoot controlled pairs to the center mass of the body. So the controlled pairs, you're going to come up to the firing position. Up. And back down. Now one thing that they do there is you really don't run the gun dry like this. You're constantly changing your mags so that your gun never runs dry. A lot of times what they'll have you do, you'll eject the mag, put it in your pocket, empty the round, put that in your pocket, and then you'll do a chamber check to make sure the functions that you just did were effective, and then you'll place the gun back in the holster. So the whole time you're there, you're always running a gun on your hip. You never take it out of the holster unless to shoot, and you always have an empty mag well. Now prior to that shooting, they also went over some trigger pull, and they actually had us come up, they had us do some dry firing, that kind of thing, to get an idea of what that trigger pull should be. They then diagnosed what was going on with your shooting through the targets. So what would you do? You'd shoot, and depending on where you would hit in the target, then that would suggest you're jerking the trigger, you're pulling it, whatever. The second half of the day there was much more shooting. However, right after lunch what we did is we stayed in for a lecture, and that lecture was on the color code awareness. Now most of you who are watching this are probably well aware of what that color code awareness is, as am I, but it was still interesting to listen to through the lecture. After the lecture we went out and did the draw process. Here's the 5-step process to draw the gun that they taught at Front Sight.
Now I'm not trying to teach this per se. Again, this is more just to give you an idea of what went on when we went down there. So that first one was just here. Now down there they don't have you draw from concealment, at least in the 2-day handgun course. You're going to get a good shooting grip here. That's 1, 2, 3 is to rotate the gun, so if I had to fire, I can fire from this position. 4 is coming out where my hands meet, and then down to the ready position, or up to the firing position, which they then would have your finger on the trigger. Now to reholster is that same process, just in reverse. You're going to bring it back, the hands separate, this goes to your midsection, and this gun goes, barrel turns down. Now what I have to do in this situation is make sure my clothes aren't obscuring the holster, and then put it back in the holster, and that's what they taught. Now eventually it's not going to be so mechanical. What they want it to look like is a little more fluid.
Now, a lot of times you're doing a lot of administrative duties with your handgun. Press checks, make sure the mag well is empty, make sure that when you racked around that it actually put around. All that administrative stuff is more for safety reasons on the range. So if you were actually out in a scenario, you wouldn't be doing all these things. It's just administrative and for safety purposes there at the range. Now the second day, they went over a little bit more of the grip. And the grip they teach is the push-pull grip. So you're pushing with your shooting hand while you're pulling with your weak. So if I'm doing this, I'm pushing with this one and I'm pulling with this one to get that grip. So they just went over that a little bit. They actually had you go out there and do it on somebody's arm, on the instructor's arm, to have you kind of feel what that should feel like. Following that, they started talking about clearing malfunctions, type 1, type 2, type 3, and an emergency. So a type 1 malfunction is when you have the gun up, it goes click, nothing happens. So how to get the gun back up in a running position. The second, or type 2 malfunction, is what people often refer to as a stovepipe. So you're shooting, the shell doesn't eject all the way or maybe partially, and you've got to clear that. A type 3 malfunction is a double feed, and that's where the bullet from underneath or from the magazine is jammed up with another bullet that is trying to go in the chamber. And it's a nasty one, but it's just a matter of clearing it, is kind of what they were saying. Last one is an emergency reload, and that is you're firing your gun, you run out of bullets, and you reload the gun. Now, it was pretty clear what they're doing at this point is they're teaching you something, then working on it. Teaching you something else, working on it. Teaching you something else, and then working on it through kind of a lecture and actual range time process. But what they did is built on one thing to another. So you'd learn it here, and then the next thing you would learn, you'd apply the first thing you learn plus that. And you just build that on throughout the course. After the malfunctions, they talked about shooting from the holster, and we went out and actually did that. So at first they start you off at 3 yards, 5 yards, and then at 7 yards. And that sums up the first half of the second day. We went into lunch, and then following that they had a lecture on civil and criminal liability. And you guys, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, I majored in criminal justice going through college. So this was particularly interesting to me. I still find it interesting. And they talked about what happens after a shooting, what to do and not to do after a shooting. I thought that was very valuable. Then we went back out to the course and we did a shoot house. This was a riot, although on the 2-day defensive you don't get a huge taste for it. What they do is they bring you into a room and they actually clip a carabiner on the back of you. I'm only guessing for safety purposes. But what happens is you go in, you have the instructor behind you, and he's actually yelling these things like, for example, hey buddy, you cut me off in traffic, I followed you home, I'm going to kill you, that kind of a thing. And all of a sudden this target pops out and you've got to shoot it. So I think in total there was 6 targets, and some of them you were supposed to shoot and maybe some you were not. There was a hostage one, and that was interesting too. So what on the hostage one actually, well, you guys, if you go, you can have fun with that. But the shoot house was a lot of fun, and I wish we could actually do a little more of it, which I understand you do in the 4-day. Following the shoot house, we went back out to the range and we did timed controlled pairs with the occasional headshot. Now, if you weren't getting these controlled pairs done in the time that they had designated, it wasn't that big a deal. It was just more or less to put some pressure on you as a shooter, and at least for me, I took it as trying to see kind of where I was falling into that time range that they had designated. Following that, we did more malfunction drills, or just a reiteration of the type 1, 2, 3 and emergency reload, so we practiced those more. Overall, I had a very good time there, and for someone who has been shooting for I don't know how many years, probably 20 years with pistols and rifles, mostly pistols, but I came out a better shooter. I came out having a good time. Now, I'm not going to say that this is some magic course that if you go in and you're a crappy shooter that you're going to come out a good shooter. I don't know. That may or may not happen. What I did observe from some is that they went in and their groups were pretty big on the paper, and then by the time the course was over they were smaller. The guy next to me, his groups were scattered all over the place, and then at the end of the course they were scattered all over the place still. So I think a lot of it has to do with you as a shooter, but they certainly do teach you fundamentals, and for me they worked. They certainly without question have made me a better shooter. There were many people there from all ages, and I mean from a 12 years old, I think maybe was the youngest, who has to be accompanied by an adult, to an older couple to the left of us that were probably in their 80s, and that was kind of fun to see them go through the course. Safety was paramount. They worked a lot on safety. Real quick, what did I do that I would recommend to you? That is, bring a backpack with you, because you can take that to class. You can load that up with some snacks. You can load that up with some water. I took some of that, it was actually some Powerade, I think it was, squirt stuff into the water so I could rebuild those electrolytes throughout the day. We went the end of October 2013. The mornings were cool, so much so that I had a light jacket on, but I'll tell you, by the time midday came, it was hot. So if you're going out there in the summer, consider that. You're going to want some sunblock somehow for your neck. Definitely, they actually require a hat, but that's probably the biggest thing. Also, to keep your ammo with you. Cargo pants were very helpful because I could keep handfuls of bullets in my cargo pants because there's a lot of running back and forth off and on the range. I'll wrap this up. I think this has gone longer than I had anticipated, but overall, great time. If you have the means, if you have the time, if you have the ability to go down there and do this, I would highly recommend it. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're the only game in town and what they teach is gospel and everything else is crap. That's not what I'm saying. I found it of value, I found it of worth, and I'm a better shooter from having been there, so I think that speaks volumes. If you can't get there, search out stuff that is near you. Do some research, see if it's reputable, but I'll tell you what, these training courses, it was a riot and well worth it.